Hey, everybody, I'm Jarrett Rush. I head up strategy and content here at Idea Grove. And the gentleman joining me on the other side of the screen is Cecil Cross. He leads all things creative for the agency. And Cecil, you and I have worked together for about a year now, I guess a little over a year now. And one of the things I noticed right away with you was that branding seems like something you're really passionate about.
Mm,
And so,
absolutely.
so why is branding a passion for you?
So it took me a while. I've been a designer for about 20 years, and it took me literally half my career to figure out that branding was something I was passionate about. I think it came during a time when I worked for a major retailer, and I saw all of the detail that went into making the brand consistent throughout all the business units. And seeing the detail and having a hand in that, it really sparked an interest in branding for me. So understanding a brand's story, knowing who they are and what they stand for, and then seeing it come out through visuals and other applications, that really struck a chord with me. I felt like I could probably even tell my story vicariously through other brands. So it really stood out to me.
So since it's a passion for you and it's something we'd like to think about as an agency, that's what we want to talk about today, sort of B2B branding and some of those misconceptions or mistakes brands make. So to kind of dive into the topic a bit, I think we get, and we all understand why is branding important for those B2C companies, but why is it something, brand building important for B2B companies as well?
So I like the approach that B2C brands take, because they want to know what's really going to solve a problem for their consumer, for their audience. But really, when you think about it, B2B and a lot of technology companies, they're essentially doing the same thing. They're solving problems for people. Excuse me. So I think where the difference is that the people that own the B2B companies, or who run the departments, could be a lot more focused on the technology itself, or maybe even the features, rather than the problem that they're solving or how it helps someone at the end of the day. So I think that's where a lot of B2B companies have an opportunity to grow.
From your experience, do you see that issue with sort of smaller startup B2B companies that are really digging in deep on the product versus larger B2B companies who may have, we've not perfected the product because no product's ever perfect, but they're much more comfortable with where their product is. Do you see, I guess, or is it is branding an issue for companies, B2B companies, no matter their size?
I've seen it for both, whether it's an emerging tech startup or a global organization, and I've done work for both. Because some of the larger organizations, even some of the global ones, they're still about 60 to 65% engineering and R&D. And then, of course, their information gets trickled out to their sales counterparts. And so a lot of times the marriage between sales and engineering, or sales engineers, they dig into the features quite a bit, right? These are guys or men and women that are proud of their work, right? They really know the technology really well. So it doesn't matter whether it's two people in the garage that come up with a really interesting idea or product or service, or even a global organization where we've got the head of engineering or the head of R&D sort of taking the charge. It's people that are really passionate about the products themselves.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think it is that so many B2B companies don't spend time building and perfecting their branding? Is it a conscious choice? Is it something that just sort of falls by the wayside because they're so focused on the product or the engineering? Why is it that they're struggling to, or why aren't they spending that time to build brand?
Well, it's been my observation, maybe yours as well, that many feel like the product is so good that it sells itself. I've seen that quite a bit, and I've heard that from some of these technology company leaders or B2B company leaders. Like, the product is so good, it differentiates itself completely from all others in the market. And so it sells itself. So there's not a large need for a big marketing push or to even establish the brand, right? People will hear about it or they'll read about it and they'll instantly want to buy it. And so the need to brand it may not be top of mind for some of these companies.
I feel like that's changing a bit. In my experience, we do buyer persona development for companies, and I think that who they're selling to is changing. The engineers talk really well to the engineers, and it used to be the engineers have much more influence over the purchase decisions. That's shifting away from them now. So if that's sort of shifting, and these companies realizing we need to build a brand, what are the elements of a strong brand?
Okay, so I'm glad you mentioned that because the engineers like to talk to the engineers of the company. So it used to be, well, not used to be, sometimes it still is. When a product needs to be sold, maybe the salesperson will make an introduction to the person who has the most influence. Maybe it's another engineer in that department or a lead engineer. And so they'll speak to one another and they can use all the acronyms. They know the industry terms very well. And, they sort of just want to get to the nitty gritty and to the details. But there has been a shift. These two individuals are still important in the buying process. But when it's branded well, some of the most important elements are a clear, concise message, portraying your brand visually through maybe it's photography, or maybe it's illustrations, or maybe it's a consistent use of colors, things of that nature, so that whoever you're telling this story to, whether it's a fellow engineer or a person in marketing or the CEO of the company, you're telling the same message, right? So you sort of have to have certain things in place to tell that message, both in written form, verbally, and visually, right? So it's not just a design thing. It's not just about making things look cool. I like to compare it to writing a really good movie. You have to have the outline and the script in place first before you move on to principal photography. So you have to know exactly who you are, what you're trying to convey before you attack it from a visual standpoint. But once you have that foundation laid, you can communicate what the value proposition is very clearly.
So with that in mind, what are some of, let's say, three branding either mistakes or misconceptions that B2B companies make, and what can they do to either avoid them or fix them if they've already made those mistakes?
Right. So one of the biggest that I've observed has been an overly complicated message. The more simplified the message, which can be reflected in copy on your website or even the way that you present when you're in a sales meeting. A simplified message will help you get your message across a lot better. A lot of companies, unfortunately, will overcomplicate the message. They will overcomplicate the value proposition. That's one. Second, a little bit more on the visual side. Since they're so concerned and so adept at the technology that's used, that's where their focus is. So some of the other issues, some of the other items that suffer might be the photography or the images used to represent their brand, right? And so you'll see a lot of mix of sort of the standard cliche stock photography. You've got people in charcoal suits, they're shaking hands or they're high-fiving. You got the guy on the laptop on a chair on the beach. That was a real stock photo that I had to clear from an organization's library. It was very interesting. So, having some consistent stock photography that focuses on real people in real scenarios, using your technology to solve their problems, right? So that shifts the focus from it's about my company and my features to how am I helping this person, right? Mm-hmm. How am I helping my audience solve their problems so they can go home at the end of the day, right? So first, an overly complicated message. Second, poor use of images and stock photography or illustrations. And then the third thing, it's kind of a joke among technological companies, but too many acronyms. And there's nothing wrong with acronyms, particularly when you when engineers are speaking with one another or industry professionals are speaking with one another, they know the vernacular, they know the lingo, it's a shorthand. But for the most part, when you're trying to make a compelling argument for something, you don't want the message to get lost in all of the different acronyms. And there's even a term that some colleagues of mine and I invented called an inceptionem, where there's an acronym inside of another acronym. Anyone who knows about this phenomenon will recognize it exactly. So too many complicated acronyms on top of an overly complicated message, you really lose what your business is all about.
Well, I know you and I could talk about this all day. We have talked about this kind of things for quite a while, just not on video. But I've got stuff to do, and I know you've got stuff to do. So
Sure.
Thank you for giving me about 10 minutes today just to talk through branding and misconceptions. Your expertise is always appreciated. So thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Bye.